So what I want to kind of focus on in my presentation today is one of the aspects that I feel in like the broader kind of the conversational AI space that from my experience, I feel is kind of a low-hanging fruit opportunity for a lot of, especially enterprise companies, but something that doesn't always get the kind of focus and attention and resources that actually deserves. And that aspect of the conversational AI space I really want to focus on is kind of the handoff and the transition that we see that's becoming so popular, so many enterprise companies, between the automate chatbot an actual human agent on the other end that generally will kind of continue things on and help get the user to resolution via a live chat. But before I kind of get into that, just wanted to kind of touch a little bit more. I know you already got most of this out from the introduction, but I've been working as a product manager in the conversational AI space now for the last 5 years, mostly focusing on enterprise products, at least for the last 3 or 4 years. In my first 1 or 2 years, I started off a little bit at a smaller company, but recently all my focus has been on conversational AI at the enterprise scale. So kind of like jumping into it, I kind of wanted to just start off, and I'm sure most of you already kind of know this and kind of like seen this kind of picture and have seen the trends that are happening and where the industry's headed. But as I'm sure like we've all seen, chatbots are becoming more and more prevalent, and they're driving more and more value. I think at this point, just about like every large enterprise company has some form of chatbot or conversational AI, it seems, or if they don't, I'm sure something that's probably on their roadmap and they're going to be looking at doing in the next couple of years. But another kind of trend that's really coupling with that is more and more help that's now being driven through chat and live chat versus more so historically, it's always phone and the users have to call in and they get like an IVR type of experience and go through the phone menu. But we're seeing more and more of the actual customer support cases now being held through live chat. And there's really, as we're making this transition now to these automated chatbots and these like live chats that are always available. It's really kind of driving this this second point that was really highlighted, which I found was really interesting when I saw it. It did not shock me at all, but just the fact that it's really becoming an expectation from customers that they can reach a given business. I'm sure, especially like if it's an enterprise business, they even have the expectation more so 24/7. That even if it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, user can go and ask a question. They're going to get some type of response. It may not be the complete answer, but at the very least they're going to be added to some queue, or they're going to have a some type of support case created, and a human is going to reach out to them the next morning as soon as business hours open. So it's really becoming more and more prevalent. Users are expecting 24/7 help. They're really expecting instant answers. And I think more and more the expectations from users that they're going to be able to interact with a human via live chat. And I think a lot of times users are really starting to expect now that enterprises, especially, are having having chatbot products that are very advanced and have the capability to be able to automate a lot of users' questions and be able to answer questions in a quick and meaningful way when the agents are not available. So kind of before I go a little bit further into the presentation, I just kind of wanted to highlight an experience that I think is far too common, especially nowadays. That it's something that I've encountered frequently. And I'm sure most of you on this call probably experienced this as well at one point or another. And so just kind of imagine you log into a website or a product that you frequently use. You're trying to complete some type of task. You run into some type of snag after several minutes of troubleshooting on your own. You're like, okay, I need some type of help. I'm not able to get over this issue or snag on my own. So you end up invoking the product self-help, and a chatbot launches. Very common nowadays. And you ask the chatbot the question, it gives you an answer. You may try a couple of other different variations of the questions. You get a few other answers. It's just not quite what you're looking for. It's not helpful enough. And let's just say the chatbot has an option, do you want to speak to a human? You end up taking that option and you end up connecting with the human via live chat. So at this point, you've already you've spent several minutes trying to do it on your own. You've spent several frustrating rounds going back and forth with the chatbot. You've waited in queue for several minutes, and now the human agent finally joins, and they start the conversation by asking you for your name and your issue, and kind of highlighting what's wrong with that experience and why I hate that experience. Why I think that there's such opportunity, especially at the enterprise level, to do so much better with this experience. Is just highlighting the first piece. I mean, none of the information or context regarding that customer in the session was passed to the human agent. So the customer had to repeat their question again after asking a few times to the chatbot, to repeat it again to the agent. And the customer had to actually tell the agent who they were. They probably had to authenticate with some of their personal information, which in most cases, unless there's some type of legal regulations, that should not be required when a user is logged in and authenticated to your product. You should know who the user is, their account, that they were able to authenticate with their password. You don't need to ask the user for their name or that kind of verification information. So I mean, really, if you look at this experience, you had a valuable customer that you made run around in circles. They wasted a bunch of time. They had to continue to repeat an issue that I'm sure probably just became increasingly frustrating to the user, with each time that they had to kind of reiterate it and repeat it. Just also that user could get back on track and really do what they're trying to do in your product to begin with. And just kind of highlighting from my perspective, like why these negative customer experiences are so common. I think one of them, from what I've seen, is just too much focus and resources are constantly directed towards automating the self-help portion of the customer journey. Like I've worked with teams and I've been in scenarios and where you can tell that a lot of businesses or teams kind of view that if you're not able to kind of help the user from a self-help kind of portion, you kind of failed. They kind of treat it as if you're not able to actually contain that user, that you've actually failed. And I think that that's a very dangerous mindset, especially at the enterprise level, that we really need to kind of shift and change. I always like to look at the self-help portion is just really one half at the most of that customer journey. And self-help, whether it's, a knowledge base of articles for the user to search, whether it's a voice bot like Siri, whether it's a chatbot, it's not going to be able to answer every single question and always be able to help the user. And you've got to create a good experience for the user after that and make sure that when the user gets to that agent, gets to the expert, that the user is not beyond frustrated, but also that the agent and expert is actually set up in a position where, they can actually help the user out and get the user back on track and create this customer journey that ends with the user actually having a good taste in their mouth and being in a position that they're going to actually want to continue to be a lifetime user of your product or service. And kind of touching on the second one, it's just really a lack of a holistic end-to-end vision and just really looking at the entire customer support journey, not just focusing on the chatbot or the self-help or the automation portion of the containment, really looking at the entire journey from the user logging into the product and envisioning the workflows that users are going to have and what type of issues they're going to have and how they're going to access your self-help and how the experience is going to be and then how you're going to get them from your self-help to one of your human experts or agents when your self-help is not able to actually do the job and help the user out. I think ultimately it just really comes from, I think a lot of times there's just too much onus that's placed on just thinking about customer support through the lens of containment versus really looking at it from lifetime customer value. I think that's one of the things that I really loved about working at a company like Intuit. That's really how we look at customer support. We're looking at more and more, looking at it from a lifetime customer value perspective and not, just focusing on containment and reducing containment, really understanding that sometimes actually worsening your containment can actually be a really good thing if it actually correlates to improved lifetime customer value and improved retention and seeing users just being happier with their product and coming back and back. And I really think that this kind of experience that I'm describing of this this kind of transition and what I call, it's often just kind of this cold, dead handoff or transition from the automated chatbot to the human agent. I think this is really a low-hanging fruit opportunity that I've seen really go underutilized in a lot of enterprise companies that I really believe has a lot of potential to really to really help out in the lifetime customer value aspect. And just kind of looking at some examples, I mean, so I've kind of talked about the problem highlighted, but what are ways that we can actually get better at this, and what are ways that enterprises can actually improve? I think one, as I mentioned before, is you just really have to envision the entire customer journey and just look at what that journey is going to be like in your product, from as I mentioned, logging and working the product from self-help to human, and just really like looking at all of that holistically. So I think when you do that, you can kind of see that things that maybe if you look under, if you take like a microscope view and just focus on self-help, you may be like, well, that's kind of a little bit annoying. The users they'll move on from it. But when you look at it from the bigger picture, you have 3 or 4 maybe annoying experiences along that customer journey, and it turns from being just a minor annoyance. Now you have a really, really upset user, and it may be too late to actually appease that user and recover and get them to buy in and be a lifetime user of your product or service. And I think another key aspect of that is an effort to bring the same AI and context that we see on that self-help side with the chatbots to the actually agent to customer conversation. And some examples of this that I've seen, I've seen some of the enterprise organizations that are a little bit more focused on what they're doing. I think one of the things that you see is they'll actually give the agent kind of upfront immediate access to the authenticated customers' personal data. So you don't see that, what is your name? Like, the agent just asking these kind of general, kind of account information questions, because, that enterprise actually worked to make sure that when that live agent expert takes that live chat and they're going to help the user, then some way or another, they're provided with that key relevant personal data on the user, so they can address the user by their name, and they know all of that upfront. You're kind of cutting out a kind of unnecessary back and forth where you're kind of learning about the users. I think especially for myself, whenever I'm logged into a product or website or service, that's always one of the most frustrating things for me, is where they make me go round after round after round after round to kind of verify myself, because I'm like, I already logged into your product and I got through your initial your initial authentication to get into your product. So why am I now having to go through more and more rounds to actually prove who I am when I already passed proving who I am to be able to get into my account? So I've always found that to be a little bit of a frustrating experience. And as I mentioned, there might be in some places, maybe some regulations where there has to be a little bit, but a lot of times I think it's just a lack of actual effort to really get that data in front of that live agent. And I think, again, just even going beyond that, there's so much opportunity to actually provide the agent with some valuable insights into the customer's prior journey in their product and even their chatbot conversation before they became connected with that agent. Some examples of them and some things that I've been working on in the products I work on is passing some things like the section of the product the customer is working in to the agent. That could be something very valuable for the agent when they're trying to actually figure out what's the next troubleshooting step. Like knowing, okay, you were in this part of the product and you're working on it. Being able to find a way to pass that to the agent so they can quickly see that and use that in a conversation in a meaningful way is really powerful. And as well, like any, self-help articles or anything that you can pass on to the agent to give them an idea of like, what did the user already try in self-help? If you have the data on, okay, this user viewed these 3 different self-help articles, pass that along to the agent expert, because then the agent expert, might say, okay, I see you already looked at this article. It looks like you tried this. What was the result of that? Instead of having the expert walk that user through the troubleshooting steps in that self-help article all the way through, and then the user realizing halfway through, hey, I've already tried this. I don't want to actually try this again. And I think another huge opportunity that I've seen really not utilized at all, which is surprising, especially when you're looking at the handoff from the chatbot to the human agent. It's just passing along the scene simply the question or the questions that the customer asks the chatbot. So the agent doesn't have to say, "What can I help with?" Instead, the agent could say something like, "Okay, like, it looks like you need help getting a refund. Let me help with that." Just something to show that everything that the user did and all the time that the user did before they got connected with that live agent, it meant something. It was meaningful, and it wasn't just a waste of the user's time. And another piece of information that I think can be really valuable in this experience for the agent to have is if there's some type of sentiment score of the customer's chatbot conversation. So right now, a lot of the chatbot platforms out there will actually come up with the sentiment score. And generally, with the sentiment scores, it's generally on like a 0 to 1 scale. And 1 is generally, the higher it is, the more positive it is. So something closer to 0 would generally mean that the customer sentiment is not good. They're likely frustrated. So being able to pass that on to that agent up front is really helpful, because if I'm an agent, I see that this customer has a sentiment score near 0, I know that they're probably coming in a little bit hot and frustrated, and maybe you should start the conversation, maybe an apology, like, "Hey, sorry to see you had you may have had a bad experience with a chatbot, or sorry to see you may have had some frustration with our product." Something to to let the user know that you have empathy for them, you have empathy for the challenges and the struggles that they're going through, and that the focus is on that user and getting them back on track. And kind of lastly, something that I've seen some enterprises work towards that I think can be really powerful is actually using AI and ML-driven models to actually provide recommendations to their agents. So based on kind of like all this data that I've mentioned, where the user is in the product, what they've asked the chatbot, the articles that they've looked at, their sentiments and their sentiment score, using all of that data to actually like recommend, okay, like this is the next best troubleshooting step, or if we have like this kind of agent-facing knowledge article that you should reference this knowledge article. This is the one that's most likely to be relevant. I start to see some enterprises go towards that. I think that can be really powerful. It also just really helps cut down on the troubleshooting time and getting the user from issue to resolution even faster. And kind of lastly, I touched on all these things that we can do and that we can provide and get from the agents. But you also have to actually train the agents and make sure that they understand how to effectively leverage all this insights and kind of AI-driven, customer data points that we're giving them, so that they know how to kind of integrate that into the conversation. I've seen at the enterprise level some really powerful tools have been delivered for the agents and experts, but when the proper training is not provided, they kind of go to waste, and a lot of times the agents won't end up incorporating them into their normal kind of conversation and troubleshooting flow unless you really provide adequate training. So kind of now that we've kind of talked about what can be done what can be done to actually make this experience better, I kind of like to revisit that previous experience that I mentioned before. So now kind of imagine instead you log into a website or product that you frequently use, you're trying to finish a task. Again, you run into some sort of snag or issue, you try for several minutes of troubleshooting on your own, and you decide you need help. You end up invoking the product self-help, and the chatbot launches again. You still go through the same several frustrating rounds. The chatbot's not able to provide you the answer you're looking for, and you decide that you want to actually speak to a human, which is via live chat. Again, you wait in line, you wait in queue for several minutes, and this time the human agent finally joins. But this time they actually address you by your name. They apologize for the frustrating chatbot experience you may have had. They acknowledge the question that you had asked the chatbot for help with. So, hey, it looks like you said you need help with a refund. I can certainly help you with that. And they are to actually dive right into the next troubleshooting step, and actually diving into the next troubleshooting step that actually works, instead of asking you, what's your street address, what's your name, all this stuff. They already have all that, and they know that, and they have everything that they need to action right away towards troubleshooting and towards getting you to where you need to be. Just kind of highlighting what's better about that experience. I mean, first off, really everything's better about that experience, but just kind of touching the main things. I mean, the relevant information and context regarding the customer in the session was passed on to the human agent. The agent knew the customer was frustrated because we passed a sentiment score along to them about their chatbot conversation. The customer didn't have to repeat themselves and their questions several times to get more and more frustrated. The customer was already logged in, so we used their authentication to be able to provide the agent with the relevant personal information that we could. But lastly, I mean, really, we treat a valuable customer as just that. We respected their time, and the onus was on getting them back on track as soon as possible, versus just really focusing on containing them and then treating the lack of containment as a failure and just kind of dumping them off and doing a cold transfer from self-help to our live agent. Yeah, that's my presentation and kind of my my walkthrough of some opportunities that I believe there are to really kind of improve and smooth out that transition between the chatbot to a live human agent. So I'll open up now if anyone has any questions or any comments or anything that they'd like me to potentially revisit.
Thank you, Casey. Yeah, please go ahead if anyone has a question.
I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Absolutely.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is there any form currently or direction of thought to create a system where when that red flag is hit, or sorry, where when that wall is hit by the AI, by the bot, and then they're running into that question where they can't get past it, is there a system set up where like a red flag or an alert does or can go off to a human, the human to take over that interaction, or to even kind of insert themselves into it without making that change noted to the customer, so it could be sort of a seamless transition rather than they hit the wall and then they know that they have to access the human?
Yeah, absolutely. That does make sense, and that's a great question. And yeah, kind of what you're talking about at the enterprise, a lot of people are talking about like building more proactivity into the help experience. It's kind of a lot of like trying to get proactive, getting ahead of, instead of waiting for that customer to actually give you that signal like, hey, I need a human, trying to be proactive about that. And I think at the enterprise level, there definitely are a lot of enterprises that are working towards that. I think each in kind of their own unique way. Like I've seen some examples where in some enterprise chatbots, they will, I think every company is trying to find the right blend or mix of making sure you're not just injecting a human potentially too often, and you might be frustrating the user or overwhelming your contact center, but also making sure that you're not doing it not frequently enough. I know, I've seen some chatbots that will have some type of like built-in logic where if a user maybe goes like X amount of conversation rounds and they just, they're not getting their answer, they're not providing any positive feedback, then that will maybe trigger some type of interjection. I mentioned like sentiment score, which is, where you're kind of tracking, is the user frustrated or happy with the conversation? I've seen some chatbots that will kind of, trigger interjecting a human if the user gets towards 0, which means the user is very frustrated. I've seen some where they're looking for if the user like swears or says, uses some type of bad language, that'll provide some type of interjection. So it's definitely happening. I think every single company kind of has their own unique way of determining like what works best for them and what works for their users. But I think that's a path that's becoming more prevalent. I'm also starting to see a trend. Is something that I work on quite a bit at Intuit, is even a step beyond that of, I mentioned in that customer journey that a lot of times as a user, you have to work in the product and you have to get frustrated and you have to click a help button. But I see there's a lot of products now that are actually doing a lot of like a lot of analysis on clickstream data, like what the user is doing in their product and the clicks that they're going through, and actually being able to create these algorithms and logic that can look at what the user is doing in their clickstream data and determine, okay, this user looks like they're confused. This user looks like they're stuck. They haven't clicked the help button and they haven't told us that they need help, but based on our clickstream data and what we're seeing that they're doing in our product, we feel that this user is likely stuck or they're likely confused. And you actually see a lot of times like launch a chat. Generally, it starts like a chatbot, but I've seen some instances where the chatbot will launch and say, hey, it looks like you're stuck. I have one of our human experts that's ready that can jump right in and help you out. So yeah, I'm even seeing some enterprises go even beyond that and kind of getting the user into the help flow for the user before they have to click the help button.
Right. And thank you. And okay, is there any drive to make it where the interaction is seamless, where or that the human doesn't even have to take over, and it could be more in the sense where the human can nudge the AI, the bot along in the right direction without the user being aware of that happening?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't really seen any of that. I think especially at the enterprise scale, like if you're talking about, chatbots are probably, you could have thousands of concurrent conversations going on once. So I think from the enterprise level, they probably look at from the point of, if this user is kind of getting stuck, it probably provides a little bit more comfort to the user, more confidence for them. If you just kind of have that, if you kind of have the human jump into the conversation, the user knows, okay, now I'm dealing with a human, versus the user potentially struggling a little bit with the chatbot, and then maybe like a human tries to actually nudge the chatbot to go to help them there. I haven't seen a lot of examples of that. There might be a few instances, but from what I've seen is it's more so like an interjection where when the chatbot's struggling, it seems like most companies want to get the human in as soon as possible. So they view that as like the best opportunity, to kind of restore confidence in the user.